just all the engineering she did the last few months to make this happen, and the coordinating and that she and our staff did with different arrangements we made. I flew in from Fort Lauderdale yesterday. That's where I live, but Elgin's still here very much. And I've had a chance to greet most of you, and I've got my high school classmates here. I've got some other St. Ed's people here. I've got neighbors over here. I've got other St. Ed's people in the back. And it's all good to see familiar faces. And Trish, who helped me get the book launch going 18, 15, 16, 17 months ago at the Elgin Museum. So Trish is here too. Thank you. And we got a gentleman here who just got back from, how long were you in Europe traveling by yourself? A month, all right. And the youth in me wants to do what he just did. And I'm grateful for the opportunity I had to do some things like that when I was young. And we also have Sherry here from the Elgin Public Museum. So she's here too, and she's been a great help with the book and keeping it going and cluing me. I've learned a lot from her about Elgin history. So today, also, at the conclusion of this, if anybody wants to join us and continue conversation over at Danny's Pizza, please join us, and we can go up the street over there on Kimball and Douglas and share in whatever libation or food you'd like, and we can continue the conversation. But today what I want to just delve into, as Sadia said, and some of you have been to my presentations before, and I'm grateful for that, the book, Two Floors Above Grief, is based on my own upbringing in Elgin. So, and in there, which is part of the title here, there was 700 pages of letters that I had been the keeper of in my family. You can just pass these around to get an idea of, I'll start some on both sides. I have folders and folders of these. I didn't bring the folders. I just brought some samples, and I'll refer to some samples when I'm talking. And these letters, and I'll talk to you I'm going to talk to, incorporate towards the end of our conversation about ideas that I can share with you about how I organize the letters in my family and how those stories enriched what I was able to put together for this book. So when you hand those out, it'll just give you an idea of the organization that I used, and I'll talk more about that as we go along. But what I want to do now is just make sure the clicker works. Okay. Maybe try this. No. Okay, Sadia, we're stuck. No, he gave it to me. Let's see if I can do it manually. Oh, here he is. I got some interference here, Scott. Okay, now try it. Aha. Okay, so some of the things I'm going to cover tonight is just how these letters connected to Elgin history. I'm going to show a lot of examples of that. And then this is the power of voice. The power of voice I found in the letters I had in my family, which I think you may have in letters from your ancestors and your family as well, and what those voices are. How do you find themes and relationships and characters in these letters? I was able to do that with these letters. Even people I knew about, my family. But when I reread their letters, I was able to learn some more about them. And that was an exciting part for me in putting the book together. And where's your family letters located? We'll talk a little bit about that too today. If you have those letters, and then if you find them, what do you do with them? And how do you make sense of them? I hope I can help in that area as well. And how did the discoveries and organization of the letters enrich your family histories? And I'll share with you how that helped with me in my own family history. Here's just a collage of the letters. That one of those pictures might be floating around here. Here's some more too. This is just a collage of the pictures that I put together, some of the letters I put together. When I was getting ready to produce the book, I just laid these out on a table. This is just a couple samples of letters. And what the book designer did is, her name's Victoria, book cover designer, she took that, the same thing that you have up on the screen, and she made that the background of the picture of this house. This is the original house. This house is on College and Division Street. It's still there. Now it's called Mildred O'Connor Funeral Home. It's across from Holy Trinity Church and the synagogue. And so when Victoria, she took the letters of this collage and put them in the background and made them look like clouds. When I first got the design, I thought, wow, those look like clouds. And a funny thing that happened, one of the letters has a reference to my aunt, and she was a sketcher in her letters. And that's another undercurrent of this whole book is people don't write letters anymore. And so this was in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s where people wrote letters, where we didn't have access to what we have now. So sometimes people would write letters the same day and tell me the same stories. And I was living in Italy at the time, and I'd get these letters and I'd hear these different perspectives of the same event. We don't get that anymore. With it's a nice convenience to have email and things. But anyway, so Victoria put this in the background, and when I blew up the cover in a poster size, I noticed this sketch right here. This came from a letter that my aunt had written, and she was lamenting the fact that a gift I had sent from Italy, she thought it was hers and it wasn't. and so she said, I might even be on here someplace. Oh, she says, I'm crying in my beer. I'm crying in my beer because that gift you sent me is really supposed to be your mom's. And this was the second floor of the house, where my aunt and uncle and their 3 daughters lived. So this essentially was her living room. So I called Victoria after I noticed this, and it wasn't until we blew it up into poster size that I noticed. I said, Victoria, the book designer, the book cover is, did you mean to put it that way? And she says, no, I didn't know anything. I don't know anything about these letters. I just thought it looked made for a nice background. I said, well, this sketch, it's coming right out of her living room window. So, I mean, I could have probably talked to Victoria and said, hey, when you put this collage of letters together, could you make it so the sketch comes out of her living room window? But that was just a happenstance, and a little bit of the background of the stories and how the cover was designed. Also with the cover design, when Victoria did it, she took the colors of the aerograms or the stamps and the stationery, and that's how she chose the colors for the book cover. She built off, here's the reds of the stamps and the aerograms. That's how she designed the cover. So I thought that was interesting when she talked to me about, I learned how the ways people design book covers. Who would have known? And certainly things I would never have thought of. And I said to her when she came with the first design, and this wasn't here, this O'Connor Funeral Home. Those of you that know the funeral home know that there was always a sign in the front. And I said to Victoria, when we had the house, there was always a sign in front. She said, well, let me figure out something. And then she came back with that. So it still gives the concept of what it was really like then. How many people here are from Elgin from that time period when you knew about O'Connor Funeral Home? Yeah, quite a few. Good. So you'll relate to some of the stories I'm going to tell. And I got to find my bottle of water. All right. So in these letters, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, I think I said there were 700 pages of these things that I'm showing around that I put into plastic sleeves. And I had put those plastic sleeves in the notebooks so that I could keep them organized. Part of my parochial school training for organization, I suppose. I don't know. As I look at my classmates here, how do you put stuff on order? So that's how I ended up. These things are still sitting on my shelf in where I live in Fort Lauderdale. But part of the story I want to start with is St. Mary's Church. And I start here because my grandparents, my mom's parents, were married there in 1910. Their history goes back even farther than that. I'm going to explain. So some people think, oh, I knew the O'Connors. I knew when they lived in town and when they came, which I'm going to get into a little bit, and through the family letters I'm going to share. But my grandparents were married here in 2010. And, backslide. They were connected in a way to the Elgin Watch Company, which a lot of you recognize and see. They had a restaurant right here at this corner, at the corner of Grove and National Street. And it was for breakfast and lunch. And this was in the 1920s. So you can imagine how busy the watch company was in the 1920s. In fact, tonight I'm wearing my grandfather's watch for this event. He got this watch in 1950, the year I was born. It still works. It's an Elgin watch. So when I'm doing things like this, I like to have the watch on and wear it. So they owned and operated this restaurant. Here's a picture of him. This is my maternal grandfather, my mom's dad. His name was Joe Serrallo. And he was from Marengo. And His wife, which you'll see in the next picture, let me go back. His wife that's my grandmother. She was from Rockford. And even today, when I'm on the bypass or going down 20, I see these signs that say, I think I just saw it today, Marengo 23 miles, Rockford 48 miles when I'm on 20. And I wished I knew the story about how my grandparents got to the point where they got married in St. Mary's Church. How did people that lived in Marengo and Rockford get together? That's a mystery to me, and one I'll probably never solve. But here is here. So this was published in some of the magazines in the 20s at the time, and that was the restaurant. That was their name, Serralo, and that was the name of the restaurant. Corner of Grove Avenue and National Street. They shared a place with a guy named Callie Williams, who owned the smoke shop next door, and they had the restaurant. And this is a picture taken about by the looks of my aunt there. This is about 1925, 26. And this is on the steps of this restaurant across from the watch company. So another glimpse into Elgin history was that they contributed in that way, that right now, that's where the riverboat is. That building is all gone. So, and that, if you remember, Bunge's appliance store was there for a while too. So Bunge's was next door to this building, and I think when Bunge's went, so did the building where my mom and her sisters and my grandparents lived into the 20s, up till about 1930, maybe a little bit later. The restaurant went kaput with the Depression. When there was no work at the watch company, there was nobody eating breakfast and lunch either. So my mother's family had to make other decisions. So St. Mary's School. I got a couple of classmates here from St. Mary's. We went to, and Kay too. Kay was there too. Kay McCune went to St. Mary's. Anybody else go to St. Mary's School? No. Okay. Well, St. Mary's. I took this picture recently. It's just on the side of the school right now, and it says since 1881. My mother and her two sisters went to St. Mary's there on Gifford Street. But one thing about St. Mary's, it says 1881, but it wasn't started at that location on Gifford Street. It was actually here in Turner Hall, which is still there. Turner Hall on Villa. That's the original St. Mary's School. So another glimpse into Elgin history was before it was Turner Hall. I'm not sure if it was built. I'm not sure if it was built as St. Mary's School or when the congregation got growing, they took over this building, but the school was in this building. And my mom tells a story in 1924 when she was in second grade. The way they got everybody to move from that building over to Gifford Street was everybody just took their books and whatever they had in their desk and walked down, what would that be, Prairie Street to go over to St. Mary's School. And they made trips back and forth till the supplies got delivered to the other school. So and of course Turner Hall looks different now. It's still there. But that's a little bit, another glimpse that I hope maybe something that in your own recollections of Elgin that comes as a surprise to you. Hey, by the way, even though I'm showing these pictures and we'll have time for Q&A at the end, if you have anything you want to contribute as I go along, just raise your hand and speak up if you've got something that relates to a picture I'm showing or a connection that you have. Okay. All right. Now, as my mom is going to doing all this stuff with her family, which goes back to Marengo and Rockford before the turn of the century, some other things were happening that made it possible for me to be here tonight. This is my aunt and uncle. Oops. Let me go back. This is my aunt. This is a very sensitive clicker. There we go. This is my aunt and uncle. And that's Mildred and Lawrence O'Connor. And this is their wedding picture, June 4th, 1930, taken in East Chicago, Indiana. My uncle, my uncle had an aspiration. He wanted to be a funeral director. He was 25, living in Hammond, Indiana, wanted to be an undertaker. And there wasn't any opportunity for him in that Hammond, Gary, East Chicago, South Bend area for him to do that. So he decided, he heard through whatever grapevines they had in the late 20s, he heard about the town of Elgin. He'd never been here before. He heard about the town of Elgin, and that in the late 20s, two funeral directors had passed away, leaving their businesses unattended. And the primary focus of those businesses was Irish Catholic or German Catholic families that were in Elgin. And they were left without a funeral director that specialized in Catholic families. So Uncle Lawrence decided that maybe that was his vocation to come here. As I say in the book, she wasn't crazy about the idea of moving to this town, but she did. So I give the two of them a lot of credit. They came as 25-year-olds, moved to Elgin, having never lived here before. Uncle Lawrence had scoped that out a little bit beforehand to figure out where he could open this business. And he ended up, this is at 118 Villa Street. This is where the first funeral home was. They were there from 1920, from 30 to late 30s. Yeah, Pat.
What's their relationship to the ones that started the restaurant?
Good question. Okay, if I go back a little bit, the ones that started the restaurant are from my maternal side, my mom's side of the family. That's my mom's dad, okay? If I go back to these guys, great question. These two, this is where the O'Connor comes in. And it was him, this is my dad's older brother. And it was he who decided to move to Elgin. And not knowing anybody here, but it was he who came to Elgin. And when he came to Elgin and moved to this house at 118 Villa Street, he brought my dad with him. My dad was then going into his junior year at Elgin High School. He was about 16 or 17. And they also brought, my uncle also brought his parents, my grandparents, with them to help start this new funeral home in this rented building. So it was the newlyweds, my uncle and aunt, back one slide. The newlyweds, they came. I'm not sure what kind of caravan they had or if they drove a hearse that they thought might get some business or how they got here from Hammond, Indiana. But think about the roads from Hammond, Indiana to Elgin at that time. There was no interstate. It was Route 20, though. Route 20 goes right through Hammond in that area, so they probably were on Route 20. But anyway, they came to Villa Street. I want you to take a look. And so here my dad's in high school, and he's new in town. His sister, his younger sister, her name was Peg O'Connor. She was about 12 or 13. In Elgin History, she ended up marrying Bob Allenson, who was Ray Ross Allenson Funeral Home. So the O'Connors and the Allensons were connected by marriage. So that's another story. But I want you to take a look at the building next to 118 Villa Street. I just took this a year ago when I was in town. That's Turner Hall. So Turner Hall, when unbeknownst to my uncle, when he took over this house, he was moving next to Turner Hall, which used to be, at that time, St. Mary's School, because St. Mary's had left there about 6 or 7 years before. So even there was that little serendipity, that little coincidence that's starting to bring my mom's Serralo family together with the O'Connor family, and another reason why I'm standing here today. This was one of the first ads that my uncle put together. My dad was still in high school when this was happening. And so my uncle had to be a marketer. That's why, like all of us do when we start our jobs, or especially if we're starting a new business, you got to market the place. So this is one of the things he put together for an ad. There's that house that I just showed you. It says 118 there, 118 Villa. House is still there. And a service for Elgin within the means of all. So he was just talking, and this might have been in the first or second year of his business. So probably was the Courier News, whatever they called it at the time. But this is how he got people acquainted with who he was and what his business was about, was through this advertisement. He also tapped into this. This is a poster that he had around town. I discovered, in the process of writing the book, one of my cousins called me and said, "Hey, I found this in the attic. You think you might want it?" Well, anyway, he sent this to me. This is a poster. This was done in about 1930, 1931. In the clouds is the Notre Dame coach, Knute Rockne. And Knute Rockne had just finished 6 seasons of being the national champion of college football. 1930, he also died in a plane crash. That's a whole other story about how he died in the plane crash. But he was, even before he was on his way to California, because with those 6 national championships, he was a hero in the country. And they were filming a documentary about him in California, and he flew out there in 1930 in a plane with wooden wings. didn't make it. But you could tell a whole other story. So this artist named Carl Rawson, you can see his name a little bit, he called this poster the spirit of leadership in a tribute to Newt Rockney. And you got Rockney in the clouds, and you got the four horsemen of the apocalypse there, his famous formation that he used in the team, and then other warriors that are on horses, the spirit of leadership. So Lawrence had this, I don't know how he got access to it, or what the rules were there about rights and how do you use somebody else's painting, but he used it. And I want you to be aware too, just where it says O'Connor Funeral Home, it's got the original address, 118 Villa, but then look at the little icon of the telephone, 1400. There's a bit of Elgin history, a little glimpse there, just because of the way they did phone numbers at the time. The phone, if you were to call Leeds O'Connor Funeral Home now, it would still be those last four digits, 1400, 90, what are we at, 94 years later. It's still there. Of course, you got all the other digits in front of it. So that's where that number started. And in those days, as you've seen from movies, or maybe you had this experience yourself, I know even when I lived in Elgin as a kid, I still had to go to the operator first. When I was 5 or 6 years old, he still had to go through the operator in the 50s to make those connections. So there's a little bit of Elgin history there, just in terms of what my uncle put together. And he put this around town in school auditoriums or clubs, and just to help another way for him to get his name out there. And again, at this time, my dad was still in high school, going to high school, helping out the funeral home. Thanks for that question, Pat. Great. Now, this is catching up a little bit. This is pictures from 1939. So my dad, my mom, the bride and groom, they met at Elgin High. Dad was class of 32, mom was class of 34, and that's where they met and started dating and started spending more time together, and eventually got married in 1939. And that's the older couple, that's the couple that owned the restaurant. And so they got married. Mom and Dad got married in St. Mary's Church. Most of us ended up at St. Mary's on the east side there. And that was a picture from their wedding day on June 1939. So the reception was at this house here. This is on Michigan Street. Michigan Street is over there by the Armory. So when you take Gifford Street all the way to the end to the Armory, and then you make a right turn, that's Michigan. And Michigan runs into where the old Courier News used to be, so off of Lake Street there. So I see people nodding their heads. There's a lot of people that know their way around Elgin. That's good. So this is the house where the wedding reception was. And the first letter I'm going to read from is a letter that my mom wrote and on her honeymoon. And I was going to leave that blank. So she and my dad, their honeymoon was at the Shorecrest Motel in Milwaukee, which at that time probably was quite a distance. I don't know. I had an occasion to go up to Milwaukee last year, visit a friend of ours, Mike Marlin, and turns out his son lived at the Shorecrest. Young Mike lived at the Shorecrest apartments there. So that was a little bit of history connection there too. But at that time, it was a pretty fancy hotel, I think, on Lake Michigan. So Mom writes to her family. This note that she wrote, they probably got home before this note probably got back to the house, probably. But she says, "Dearest Mother and Father, we got away so quick that I didn't get a chance to give you all half as big a kiss as I wanted to. I miss you already. I'm just a little bit blue at the moment. We have a beautiful room right on the lake. I can hear the water and the foghorns as I am writing this. I just took a shower and feel a lot better. My whole body ached when we got up here. My dress is up to Lou Adams' house. She might bring it over. Otherwise, we'll go over and get it when we get back. You know, that little hat I had, it doesn't stay on unless I put the band under the chin, which I don't like very well, but maybe I can fix it and get some thread someplace." She's on her honeymoon. Anyway, she says, "Give Dee-Sue and Mary Lou," those are my mom's nieces, "a big kiss for me. I'm going to bed now and to rest my weary bones. Thanks again, Mother and Dad, for a grand wedding and reception. All my love to all of you. Love, Marion." Then there's a P.S. It says, "Me too. Thanks a million for everything, mostly for your daughter and sister. We're both very happy about everything. Remember me, I'm the new guy in the family, Bill." So that was how the Serrallo family and the Serrallo family history from Rockford, Marengo, Elgin, joined together with this group that moved in from Hammond, Indiana, and that's how, again, one of the reasons I'm standing here. But I love that letter from my mom, and it was just discovered. I think one of my brothers uncovered it someplace. But just to read it from, I never knew my mom as a vulnerable bride, homesick after one night away from her home. And I didn't see that side of her, of course. But to read that about her and to read that part of her history was another way to learn more about my family history and her relationship with my father. It's true. So that was one thing, one of the letters that I wanted to share with you. So now this brings us over to the house. Well, my uncle had put all that effort into advertising. That there was that house on Villa Street. She had my aunt and uncle had 3 daughters. That house got smaller because of 3 daughters. And my mom and dad were then pregnant with my brother Barrett, who was born in 1940. And Uncle Lawrence found out about this house on the corner of Division and College Street. I explained in the book just about all he had to go through to get it secured so he could buy it. It had gone into disrepair a little bit in the 30s because of the after effects of the Depression and the economic times. So the house had gone through a few owners, and it was in a little bit of disrepair. So he was able to negotiate that, and the neighbors at the time were worried that there was going to be a lot of traffic, and what are we going to do with all those cars? So he had to go through that kind of zoning thing, and it's all explained in the book a little bit. And also that's explained because I gained that information from former Mayor Mike Alft, because he wrote all about that too in some of his history of Elgin too. But, so there's the house, and I think, so in the first floor, when they came into this house, it was a single family house. And I've been through a few owners. I'm going to tell you a little bit of history about that in a second. But when they got into the house, the first floor was the funeral, where they converted that into the funeral home. All the different parts, and some of you have been there for funerals and wakes over the years. The lower floor is where all the other facilities were for the funeral home. The second floor was just a collection of rooms, bedrooms, I suppose, in the original house, but they converted all that into bedrooms and a kitchen and a living room. This is my aunt and uncle's bedroom. This was the stairway. Upstairs was a ballroom. Like a lot of Victorian houses, they had a 3rd floor, and this was a ballroom. And the ballroom had 2 stages in it. 2 stages, so then when they had company over and they wanted to entertain, they would bring the family all the way up to the 3rd floor, and they had stages there where orchestras would perform. This was the bedroom I shared with my 2 brothers and myself. And in that bedroom, I was brought home there in 1950 when I was born, but in that bedroom there was a stage there. And the stage was there until I was 8 years old. So my brothers and I lived in that room with a stage, and we played on the stage, we played under the stage, we arranged our beds around the stage, and I really think that's probably why I had sort of I enjoy doing theater. So I start rehearsals for a play next Monday. But so that many years later, I think it's because I slept next to that stage for the first 8 years of my life, in my bassinet and my crib and my twin bed, and it was there the whole time. So that was just a little bit of the history of the house. My mom and dad's room was right here. This was our living room. And then we had other spaces. Some of you people here have been up there. So here's another picture of it, of the house. This was taken about in the 40s. But I want you to be aware of this building right here. This building is still there. This is called 278 Division Street. And I'm going to show you a current picture of 278. It's right here, 278. So we're talking about 2 blocks down from St. Joe's School, about a half a block from Gifford Street. But this house was owned originally by Gail Borden. So, and Gail Borden had a stepson named Alfred Church. Alfred Church was one of the first owners of the house that became O'Connor's. So there was so Alfred Church bought it. There was an owner before that. And then Alfred Church bought it. There were 3 or 4 owners in this period time of the 30s when finances were tight and people were selling the house off and on. And that's where Lawrence was able to step in and get it at a good price. But when I think about that, here I'm standing in Gail Borden Library. And in another glimpse of Elgin history, our family is connected in such a way because this house was next to our house the whole time I grew up. and it was the original Gale Borden house, and here we are in the library that's named after him. So I thought that was another cool, for me, cool glimpse into the history. All right, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I told you about my mom and dad's wedding. I told you that when they got married in 1939, their dream was to have their own funeral home. They wanted to be like my uncle was. They wanted to start their own funeral home. And Dad was just, what was he, 26, 27? He wanted to start his own funeral home, but he really couldn't do it in Elgin, not with his brother here. And so there was an opportunity to go to Aurora. So they moved to it, my mom and dad, in the first year of marriage, similar to my aunt and uncle, moving from Hammond over to Elgin. Mom and dad said, we're going to move to Aurora. And they found a house they could rent. They did all the stuff that my Uncle Lawrence did on Villa Street. And my mom continued working in Elgin. This is a picture of the third rail, the Elgin, Aurora, and Chicago train that would go from Chicago. There's different routes. It would go from Chicago over to, Chicago, Aurora, up and down. You can. I had a map of it, but when I put it on the screen, it was so tiny it wouldn't make any difference anyway. I'm sure you can find those maps at either one of the Elgin museums about the third rail. But Mom would get on this train, and she would get off at Raymond Street. There was a stop at Raymond and Bluff City Boulevard, and that's where she would get off. So you get on the train in Aurora, the first year married, get off the train, and she would get off at Raymond Street, and she would go to work at this place called Collingbourne Mills. It's got a Bluff City address. I don't have it on here, but it was on Bluff City Boulevard. Probably, I don't know if the building's still there, but even now that's industrial down there by Bluff City and Raymond Street down there. So she would walk over there, and she worked in the office, but Collingbourne not only did, they had a lot of thread, but they also did a lot of clothing design, mostly lace type stuff. And people would, Mom would be in some of the magazines modeling the lace collars or the sweaters or the things they made. So that's how she worked there, but commuted. She was a commuter from Aurora to Elgin on that train and walked her way over from the Raymond Street stop. And then she would, at the end of the day, she'd go back, get on the train and go back to my dad. But in that situation in Aurora, after 1 year of marriage, during 1 year of marriage, they were now pregnant with my brother Barrett, who was born in December 1940, and they only had one funeral. So, and the money they had borrowed, that they had used all that up. At that time, my Uncle Lawrence said he had the business was growing, so he says, why don't you come in with us? So they came back to Elgin, and they moved into the house. And then it was really Dad, right about this time that Uncle Lawrence took this over. And Dad was very handy. Dad was a carpenter. He had a lot of skills that way. And they converted the funeral home, like I explained before, and did a lot of the woodwork and got that house going and made it into a place where people could live, their family. And the thing about the two apartments, these two apartments right here, where the families lived, in order for me to get to my place, my bedroom, my kitchen, my living room, in order to get there, I could go up these stairs, or there was a back stair. But in order to get there, I had to go through their apartment to get up to our apartment. And that was true of my mom and my dad. I call the apartments conjoined. So in this funeral director, in the profession of a funeral home, a lot of families live near or in the funeral home. It's pretty common, not as common now as it used to be. But but we didn't have really separate apartments. So fortunately, we all got along. It could have been a nightmare. It could have been another version of 6 Feet Under, probably. But we all got along. And so my aunt and uncle were really like a second set of parents. Their daughters were older than my brothers and I, but they were like older sisters. And so we remained not just cousins, but we were really like brothers and sisters and had two sets of parents. It was a gift. It was a gift. Reason I bring this up, anybody recognize this? What's this? Okay, tell me about the smell from Woodruff and Edwards and the odor and everything. And so the reason I bring this up is another glimpse into Elgin history. My mom, I have a letter here that I have written in, and again, I'm working to, this is called, thanks for asking, this is called Woodruff and Edwards. The building's no longer there. It's really, where are we at? It would be if I was going this way, yeah, this way, across the river, just across the river. And it was, and then down towards town a little bit. It's across the river by the dam, where the dam is. And so that was a foundry. And what did they make there? Just a lot of iron products, I guess? But smelly stuff. Anybody ever worked there?
They make desks, metal desks.
What'd they do, Mary? They made what?
Metal desks.
Metal desks. Oh, really? So some of the classrooms you might have had at our parochial schools were from Woodruff and Edwards. Ah, interesting. For the boats. Okay. So that's part of what they did. All right. Yes, go ahead.
I think I remember seeing an old coffee grinder in a restaurant in Wisconsin, and I think that had Woodruff and Edwards on it.
Yeah. And I've seen stuff on some of Sherry's site that she puts on Facebook where people find things that have Woodruff and Edwards on there and stuff. So it was a foundry, but heat and lots of stuff going on there. So in 1959, one of my cousins, my sisters, who lived in the funeral home second floor, she married and moved to New York. But one of the ways we communicated was through letters. And that was my aunt and uncle, my mom and dad would teach me to write her a letter. We didn't make phone calls. Phone calls were too expensive. But so here I am, September 23rd, 1959. I'm at St. Mary's with some of these guys in fourth grade, I guess. And I'm writing to my cousins, and my mom's helping me type it on a typewriter. And it's all in capital letters. And I'm saying to my cousins who live in New York, my mother is going to start working tomorrow down at the watch factory in the office. And this is her second job this week. Her first job was at Woodruff and Edwards, but she didn't like it and only worked 2 days. So I'm not sure what the story was, if something didn't work out, but she lasted 2 days there and did end up at the watch company back across the street from the restaurant where she had grown up, and she was all back. My mom, when you think about my mom, this is really essentially the neighborhood right here and a little bit beyond. But my mom, using St. Mary Church as the base, she in her whole life probably lived no more than 3 or 4 blocks from St. Mary's her whole life until she moved to Huntley when she retired. But up to that point, she was right here in the same East Side neighborhood. And then I'm writing to my cousins. This is again September. Those of you that went, not even nowadays, I think most of our schools are air conditioned. They weren't then, but it's very hot in Elgin, and school is just terrible because of the hot weather. When you run and play outside, you get all sweaty. But then I have another paragraph here, typed, and I refer to this place. Everybody know where Channing Park is nowadays, everybody? Okay, and they have this sign here now to memorialize it. And, the Channing Elementary School's there, but it was a cemetery. And it says right here, the site contained as many as 3,500 graves. And following the opening of Bluff City Cemetery in 1888, many of the bodies were moved, and Old Sem was closed in 1945. That's one work crew I wouldn't want to been on to move those bodies. But so that's why the nickname for that place is the Old Sem. But going to St. Mary's School, we as students there, they would send us to, because the playground got pretty small. We were allowed. I don't know, Mike or Bob, do you remember? Did they have supervision for us up there? I know. Did they? Okay. 7th and 8th, yeah. Yeah. We could go up to the Old Sem. And even, I guess, according to this letter, it must have been even younger, because I'm writing this in 4th grade. So maybe they loosened up the rule that year, I don't know. But it says, I play up at the Old Sem during noon hour because it would be too crowded on the playground next door to the school. I have lots more fun up there because it's much bigger. One day when I was playing up there, we found a gold gravestone. And I think they're mostly gone, but even in the 1950s, it wasn't. Sometimes you could see an old gravestone up there. I think maybe they've gotten rid of them all now. But it was sort of an adventure as we were playing whatever games we were playing, football or whatever it was up in the fields, that we would come across a gravestone and roam around. I do remember sledding there one time, and probably still have the scar when my saucer sled went up a tree, but that's another story. But that's another bit of glimpse of that this really used to be a cemetery. Yeah, Kay.
So there are theories and there are stories that go around that the school that's now built is haunted.
Oh, Channing Elementary?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's that people say the elevator and all of a sudden just go up and all kinds of things happen. So I don't know.
Could be.
Yeah.
It could be kids just having fun with that. Yeah.
Well, this happens like at night, I guess, like a crew that will come in and work, but you know.
There are still some graves there.
Is there, Bob? Still more graves? Where do they have them? Just really low to the ground?
There's also great
Trish?
evidence in the southeastern corner, and it's there. Very far southeastern corner.
It's just still grave. With a stone, you can still recognize the name on it and stuff too?
I think it's kind of unusual,
Okay.
but and you've got to look for it because everything's grown around it and everything.
Yeah.
And it's not advertised there. Because a lot of the families couldn't afford to have their loved ones moved, or they didn't have family around. I am getting them moved, and there's in Bluff City, there's a whole burial for just that didn't have anyone to give them their own gravesite. It's in Bluff City. That were moved
From
from Channing.
Channing, that they couldn't trace the families or anything, and they just, because Channing had been there for so many years before 1888. So Channing was really that was the first cemetery in town? No, it wasn't? What's the first cemetery?
Chapel Street, it had the first place. That's where the Giffords founded it. It was at Chapel Street, but that was less than an acre at the most, and so they outgrew that.
And then to Bluff City. All right, thanks for that contribution and information there. Anything else? Anything else in cemetery history that they donate? Okay. I bring this ambulance up, not because, and it's certainly not taken in Elgin. You can see from the landscape in the back, that's not an Elgin site. But I bring it up, and just to tell a little story, again, a little glimmer into Elgin history. I say this because in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, maybe even into the 70s, Elgin didn't have paramedics. I'm not even sure if the word paramedic was invented at that time. I don't know. But even when we were going to school in high school. But there was a time, at that time, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, there were 6 funeral homes in town. And each funeral home had its own ambulance. And they each took a turn to be what they called on call. So every 6 months, O'Connor was on call. And so we had to be able to be sure we're going to answer the phone and go to whatever we went to. I tell a story in the book. It's a little long, so I'm not going to read it out loud. But tell a story in the book about going with my dad on a number of times. But one time, he said, come on, I must have been 12 or 13. He said, get in the car, get in the ambulance, we're going. There's an accident. And it was over on, I can picture it, it's right up the street here. It was on Kimball, right up where the old Kimball and Spring, where the old lumberyard used to be, right there. And so we went up there, and there was a motorcyclist who was on the ground, just laying there. And then there was a car involved too. And so Dad and the police were there. But Dad said, Kev, go over to the guy who's laying on the ground and just talk to him and see if he's, I was 13, but paramedic, 13. But I went over and just talked to him. And then when it was time, when Dad made sure that the other car was okay, and he was trying to, what do you call that in medical terms, triage, or what you're trying to do 2 or 3. I've got a nurse friend here, how to do that. So and then he said to me, just keep talking to him, and then we got the guy into the ambulance. That looked similar to this. I found this on the internet, but the ambulance we had looked similar to that. And he said Dad drove, I stayed in the back. He had that little window that was between the driver's seat and me, and he just said to me, talk about anything, talk about school, just keep him alert, just talk. And at those days, the ambulances didn't have the kind of equipment they had. It was imperative for Dad to get to St. Joe's in that case, up to the hospital as soon as he could so they could get the help. So it was certainly different than how we do things now, but that was my paramedic experience as being the son of an undertaker. Now here's, who recognizes this? The old City Hall on the corner right downtown. And in this old City Hall, right here, there was a clock right here. In the summer of, after we graduated from St. Ed's in 1968, 56 years ago, you guys, 56 years ago, I worked in this right here in the summer of 68, sorting through old files and records. It was hot up there, and I used to talk to the pigeons, and our friend Gary Biesterfeld used to work at Barnett's department store. He and I had a system workout at about 10:30 every morning. We would signal each other. I would get up here, and he would get in the display window at Barnett's downtown, and we would converse a little bit back and forth as much as we could. But it was hot, and I was doing whatever I could to stay with 2 or 3 fans. And I would go up into this tower here and just explore all kinds of records up there. Yes, go ahead. Where is that? Good question. Thank you. This is Chicago Street right here. The building's gone now. This is Chicago Street. This is yeah, it's parking lot. This is Spring Street, the old Elgin Federal Savings. I don't know what they call it now. It was over here. This is that little Dexter, whatever the court is here. And then and a block this way is the original Gale Borden Library up that way. That give you a perspective? Okay. So, but in this, the reason I bring it up is not only, I don't bring it up because I work there. I bring it up because when I was a student in Chicago, my aunt was very good about writing her letters. And she wrote a letter to me about Elgin City Hall. This was September 1969. She said, "Hey, the old town is getting a new face. The City Hall is now leveled." And I'm sure that leaves you with a nostalgic feeling, knowing that I had spent a summer there sweating and working up there. I read in the Courier News where someone stole the hands from the tower clock. Would you now say that person has time on her hands? And as I was reading that, I thought, I wonder why she used the word her. Did the person who was alleged to have taken the hands, was it a female? But she said her hands. Thought that was interesting. But anyway, that building came down in 1969. And then I did get and I did get to work at the new City Hall, taking the old records I had boxed up in the summer of ’68 and unboxing them at the new City Hall. That was another summer job I had. So that's another bit of history. This was her letter, how she typed her letters. That sample might be floating. There it is. It's right here. It's the actual sample. This is the letter where she wrote about the clock. She was a typist, and one of my memories of my childhood is hearing her type her letters, and that was probably onion skin or very thin paper. That's how we communicated. Recognize this? What's this? It's not there anymore. This is the old St. Joe Hospital. And this was that was up on the east side. You worked there? I worked there too for the kitchen. Did you and I work there at the same time in the kitchen?
Well, no, after I got out of college, about 3 months.
Oh, when you got your pharmacy degree?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's that, Bob? You were the orderly there. Okay. Anybody else have a chance to work at St. Joe's? Oh, yes, Mary. Okay. What'd you do? You went? Oh, you were in the kitchen too? I worked in there. There was a time when a lot of St. Ed's kids were working in the kitchen, so I worked in the kitchen there too. This is at help me with the streets, Elgin. It's right. It's a block off Dundee Avenue, just in Jefferson. Jefferson would be the street, Jefferson. So it's like between Dundee and Spring Street as you go up north to the north side. Yeah. There's a park there now. There's a park there called St. Joseph's Park. There's an elementary school. St. Francis Park, thank you. And then there's one of the Elgin public schools is right there too. So that was I spent there a lot of time, not only going with Dad on ambulance calls, but I was born there. Anybody else born at St. Joe's? Yeah, look at all those hands that went up. Wow, yeah, a lot of us were born at St. Joe's. And so that was the structure. And my grandparents were there. They both died there. My brother, most of our family was born there, and just in and out jobs, like we all mentioned. So a lot of history there. But my aunt also wrote a little note about her experience with St. Joe's, and here's my letter. Here we go. She said, hey, she wrote about her health issues in November 23rd, 1970. Hey, I was supposed to work at a bazaar at church, but I got a pain in the middle, so I stayed home. She's now 1970. She's probably in her 60s at this point. Tomorrow I'm to go to the lab for GI x-rays. You know that procedure where you swallow the cement? I remember several years ago I had those tests done at St. Joe Hospital, and I guess someone slipped up and didn't give me the usual laxative when it was all over. So I got into deep trouble until a nurse came to the rescue. Ever since then, every time I go to St. Joe's and see that nurse, she calls me Gravel Gertie. So, but that was quite a structure. And I know later years, some of us worked at the new St. Joe's Hospital, which is now, 50? It's been there 50 years almost. This year, I think. 50 years? You both worked at St. Joe's. 1974, right, I think? 74, yeah, right. So this was a little bit of... Oh, good question. Probably 1800s in there. Trish, Sherry, you know anything about when that might have been built? Yeah. And it was built by Catholic, with a Catholic religious order called, help me, Bob, which order was that? Franciscans? Yeah. So it was built by the Franciscans. Sharon? Yes, if you go back, I think in my searching sometimes, if you go back, there is there's a picture of the original house where the sisters first started the hospital. And then, in this picture, I'm not even sure when this picture was taken. Yeah, it's taken from the air, though. Interesting. But you can see where the chapel is, where the church part is. But I think they had various additions built to it over the years too. St. Joe's. So another glimpse into history here. I bring up the YMCA partly because it's had a few locations in town, but partly I want to share a letter that my dad wrote about the YMCA. He's writing about the YMCA on Channing and Division Street, which really, in terms of buildings, had a short lifespan, probably about 30 years. But I remember it was built when we were in elementary school, and as elementary kids and high school kids, we would hang out there at the Y, and then now it's on the west side. But even prior to that, those of you that even go farther back, before the Channing place was built, it was right downtown in Elgin, right by, yeah, was it? Even when we were kids, it was there in the 50s and 60s. It was still there. So my dad got interested in yoga, and I think here it is. He got interested in yoga, and he writes me in April 1971. He wrote me a letter. Where was I living? I was a student in Rome at the time. Hey, I think you would love yoga. I signed up for the next session. I hope I can keep it up. Some of you knew my dad. 4 lessons, 4 weeks. I've tried to keep it up on my own. It takes a lot of nerve at my age to be in the class with only 2 young guys and about 15 girls and women. While I'm doing it, I enjoy it, and I try to do some at home every day or evening. I may not last due to conditions and circumstances. I don't know what he meant by that. But at present, I really enjoy it, and I practice at home. I don't know a soul in my class, and I hope they don't know me. If I can keep going long enough to learn enough to get into the advanced class, they have one called Professional Men. But you have to have a good form and be in condition to catch up with them. I think I'd like that, but we'll see. So my dad he had a pretty adventurous spirit and was always wanting to try stuff. He did take me to a couple of yoga classes at the Y, and I still do yoga once a week. So I'm back into it now after the last few years. I'm doing it more frequently. So another bit about just the idea that the Y moved from place to place, but here's a guy in the 1970s when there probably weren't that many men doing yoga, and yet he took it upon himself to give it a go. So there he is. Oh, I meant to show this. That's not my dad, but I thought, well, I'll have that showing while I read the letter, but I forgot. Anyway, now I'm going to show the Crocker Theater. Who's been to a movie at the Crocker Theater? All right. So again, I'm going to a letter from my dad, and he is talking about the Crocker Theater. This was written in January 6, 1971, and then you'll get a little context as I read the letter. I wanted so badly to see Love Story. So mother and I were standing in line by 8:50 p.m. at the Crocker Theater. We finally got in, and we sat up in the balcony for the 9 p.m. show. Remember the balcony at the Crocker Theater? Yeah. They have features running from 12:45 p.m. and the last show starts at 11 p.m. It opened Christmas Eve, and I guess the lines are like that for every show, if you can imagine that at our Crocker. It's great. I like, next one. That's his letter. That's his handwriting. That's where I'm reading from that letter, but it's easier to read it from the book than from his handwriting. But here's a poster. He says, I like Ellie McGraw, but I can see why they looked for the right guy. He is fabulous. It's like the book almost to a T, for which I'm glad. They let her swear throughout, just like in the book. Don't miss this movie, and I hope you enjoy it too. The book here is now on the top for the 43rd week in a row. The book and movie move, but there's so many angles to continually analyze in relationships, etc., to decide. Okay, who cried at the end of Love Story here? Who cried? Yeah, okay. So that was his account there. I just bring that up because of the Crocker Theater and how that was certainly an element of Elgin history for a lot of people in our time. And we'll go back. Now I'm going to go to the YWCA, not only to talk about the YWCA, but also this gets into Mom a little bit. Mom was a smoker, as was my dad. They smoked all through high school, smoked until my dad quit in 1969. And my mom got the urge then for her to quit too. So she, as I say in the book, Mom continued to smoke. Dad didn't find fault with her. He just knew the tenacity of that addiction. She quit 4 months later after he did. In a letter that's dated November 13th, 1969, she lamented, I've been reading in the paper about the people attending the clinic down at the Y to quit smoking. I really feel for them and almost think it wouldn't hurt me to go down and get in on the sessions just to make it easier for me. Although I'm certainly over the hump, it has been since September 21st since I smoked a full cigarette, I would still like to have one, and the withdrawal symptoms are horrible. All I can say to you kids is don't start the stupid habit, and you will never have to go through the ordeal of quitting. My brothers and I never did smoke. So, last Friday night, we were with my class reunion group at the Elks Club for dinner. There were 7 couples, and only one girl smoked, and she only had one after dinner. One other man, her husband, smoked a pipe. So I bring it up when I talk about Elgin history, not only because I'm making reference to the Elks Club, which was a place where a lot of people went, and making reference to the Y, but also just the prevalence of that type of addiction in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and what people experienced to try to undo that in their lives. So that was, and they had these programs. Well, they still have programs for smoking addiction. But just to give my mom a lot of credit for doing what she did and seeking the help in those places. Any thoughts about the Y or the Elks Club or anything else that come to mind as you talk? The building's still there, isn't the Elks Club building? What do they use it for now? It's empty? It's been sitting empty all these years? Oh, really? Okay. Which I remember going to something there about 30 years ago, so there was another group that tried that once before. But my dad spent a lot of time at the Elks Club, and when the beepers came out, that's where we usually found him, was at the Elks Club playing cards. But they had quite a social atmosphere for a lot of people in town up until probably 30. Is there still an Elks Club in Elgin?
Yes.
Is there? Just a different location? Okay. All right. Let's see what we got going here. Blue Moon. Who knows the Blue Moon? The Blue Moon. So now we're moving over to the west side, the Blue Moon. And this building's not there. I think did we have a prom there or something too? Did we have? You had post prom there? Did you? 64? Okay. Well, who's what? Larkin prom's there too. Yeah, I don't know if our particular classes at St. Ed's did or not, but I remember going there with my family or after I got out of high school when it was more open for people our age to go to dances there. I did. But I bring this up because it was a staple in Elgin for a lot of people for their entertainment and for big band leaders to come and to provide entertainment for people. And so my aunt writes about this in a letter she wrote to me And I'll find it. Here it is. Here we go. So, this is November 12th, 1970, for another glimpse of Elgin history. We went to the Blue Moon Ballroom to see and mostly hear Wayne King and his orchestra. They were male and female singers with the orchestra, and believe me, all the mamas and the grandmas. Oops. Here we go. All the mamas and the grandmas were oohing and eyeing over the male crooner. This is capital letters, he was really adorable. Capital letters again. Really, Kevin. I don't believe he was hired to sing, but just to smile and get the gals swooning. Afterward, we decided to get a sandwich someplace, but all the dining rooms were closed. So, guess what? We ended up at Massey's. I guess it has a 4 or 5 a.m. closing. We stayed till the end. It was jumping, and we got the usual cries of Grandma, Grandpa, but in a fun kind of way. So Fox Valley history here too. So we expand a little bit beyond Elgin. And this was let me go one more thing.
Who wrote that last one, Kevin?
That was my Aunt Mildred, and she's going to write this one too. And this was this is what it looks like in the sleeves. This letter she's going to write about. I'm going to tell you about. This is getting into a little scandal that happened in Elgin, and I'll leave it to you if you know the person's name who the scandal was about. But part of it was located in the professional building, which is still there, 164 Division Street. And let me go back. Oh, before I get to Paul Powell, it ties in here too. So my aunt writes to me, Aunt Mildred. She said, this is on January 9th, 1971, on thin, like I said here, on thin onion skin paper. And sometimes she would use both sides for economic reasons, I suppose. But to read her letters, sometimes you had to sort of put something behind them because the words would bleed through. But that was part of her nature. Did you hear from anyone about the retired former judge? On December 15th, he was arrested and released on bond because it had come to light that he had helped himself to a check for $12,000, which wasn't his. I guess in his retirement, he has practiced law, and he was the lawyer for a couple that was getting a divorce. The man in the case had given him a check for $12,000, which he was to turn over to the man's wife. But when she didn't receive it, though it had been forged, the judge was arrested. In an article in the newspaper a couple of nights ago, the reporter wrote he admitted his guilt and made restitution, but of course his license was revoked. I really feel sorry for him and his family, as Kathleen, that's her daughter, as Kathleen said when she was working for him, sometimes he would more or less rob Peter to pay Paul. I guess this time he just couldn't repay Peter. Maybe I'm just naive, but I sort of think he really wasn't a thief, or he couldn't have practiced for 38 years without getting caught. He was so active in Boy Scouts and many civic affairs, it seems a shame to have this spoil his reputation. And then her next sentence is, then she says, that, coupled with our deceased Secretary of State, Paul Powell, which certainly wasn't direct Elgin history, but affected us in Elgin, it's quite sickening. Maybe you've read since Powell's death about $1.5 million in cash has been found stashed in shoeboxes, evidently to avoid taxes. Don't you think? And she says, don't you think you're aspiring to be the wrong business? I was a political science major. I think so that's what she was referring to. So that was a little more tidbit of Elgin history with that going on with, I guess you could call it a scandal. But I want to get on now this part. Oh, this part. One more picture. Okay. This is a rendition of the house, the same house, that was done. I don't have any, I've done with the letter reading portion, but I want to tell you a couple of stories that connect with Elgin's history. This is a rendition of the house that was done in 1955. The artist named, I had it this afternoon, it's going to come to me. She was a high school student at Elgin High, and which then was on Chicago Street. And the students at the time in the art classes were encouraged to go to the neighborhood to do their sketches. So she came into the front yard of the house and did this sketch. And when she finished it, she put it, she gave it to my uncle and my dad, and they had it hanging in the house. for many, many years. And through a different chain of events, it's ended up with me. So I have it now. So the name, it's going to come to me. She's still alive. And I contacted her daughter to get permission to use it. There's a picture of it in the book, to get permission to use it in the book. And yeah, go ahead and use it. And I said, do you want it back? And they said no, because I wanted to make sure of that for sure too. But so I'm the keeper of it now. But a little bit of, I don't know if high school classes nowadays would be allowed to leave campus to go sit in somebody's yard and do yard. I'm not sure how all that worked out permission-wise or anything, or how many sessions this took her to do, or how they worked that out, or if she came to Dad and Uncle Lawrence and said, can I sit in your yard for a while? And you think art periods probably are only 45 or 50 minutes. Who knows what they were in 1950. So, but that was one thing. The other thing I came across last month, I was here and I did a radio program at WRMN about the book and Elgin History. And this was in their lobby. And this radio is very similar to the one that we had in our funeral home, in the kitchen, on the second floor kitchen. And my aunt always had it turned on every day, from 7 a.m. with the news all the way till 4 or 5 o'clock. The prime show for her, though, was noontime. Not only was it lunch, but it's when they read the obituaries. And that, when you're the wife of a funeral director, you listen to the obituaries. And so she would not only listen to make sure that the obituaries from the O'Connors were read correctly and had all the correct information, she also kept a little notepad with tally marks on it so she could keep track of the business at the other funeral homes. So then she could go back to my dad and my uncle and say, hey, Wait Rouse Allenson has this many, or Stout across the town has this many, and so. So she kept track. That was her own way of data analysis, that we would call today. Kay. The Irish sports page. Expound on that.
My friend told me that. He said, you read the Irish sports page yesterday. That was the obituaries.
Okay. Well, then she was listening to the Irish radio show at noontime to get the obituaries. So that was another. I'm sure a lot of our houses had radios similar to that, and we depended on stations like WRMN or the Chicago stations to get our information. All right. We've had some nice dialogue about Elgin history. Before I just get into this about a little bit about letters and things, other comments? Mary? With the Greek dances? Oh, if that St. Sophia's had sponsored, that they had them there, or were they? Oh, yeah. Well, that's who else knows Greek tradition? Anybody else know Greek tradition? One of I was married. The mother of my children is Greek. I went to a fair share of Greek weddings in my time, and that was a part of the tradition too. Was at the wedding they would throw money to the bride, and then the bride and her attendants would pick up the money, and that's how they celebrated the wedding. Other thoughts about? Thanks, Mary. Other thoughts about Elgin history, or comments, or ideas that you have? Yes, sir.
I think the village people stayed at the well.
I bet they did. They probably wrote the song there, don't you think? I'll add that to my next presentation. Other thoughts? Okay, let me just unpack this idea about letters a little bit. Where are your old family letters? Thoughts, ideas? Where do you keep them? Where do you have them? Yes?
My grandson found them in the basement of my house from when we cleaned out my mother's house. Had quite a good time with them.
So you still have them, and he's been reading them. Okay. All right. What have you found out?
Well, we found a lot of information about when an aunt of my father's passed away, and the paper was so thin, the notes were written on, but the handwriting was very easy to read. It was so neat. And he took it to his history teacher at Judson.
Okay.
So he got a kick out of it.
Well, certainly the handwriting is the variations of handwriting are certainly fascinating. Yeah. Other people, where are your family letters or things that you keep track of? Yes, Sharon.
You knew my mom.
I knew your mom. Yeah.
and I still have all of that. My sisters decided that I should keep all.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to store it, basically. So I have all of it, including all of her 8 movies that she's taken. We were small children. She was big into photography, photos. So I have all of that.
So what have you done with the movies?
Well, some of them we did have
Yeah, digitized them. Yeah.
My uncle, he was 80 years old or something. We had a party, and my sister Pat says hi.
Hi, Pat.
I told her I was coming tonight.
Uh-huh.
That she should come.
Uh-huh.
Well, she said she's in Denver.
Okay. I came from Fort Lauderdale.
So anyway, well, we put it on a DVD. In fact, it's a double.
Mhm.
It goes way back into the 50s when I was like 1 year older or
Mhm.
even younger. But it was remarkable to look at that, and I did find an 8mm picture at a Goodwill with my mom. We got the discount even because it was a Tuesday or something. I don't know, but now that's kind of like not always writing right, so I don't want to ruin the film. But anyway.
Yeah, there's some great places. I use a place called Scan Cafe. You mail this stuff off, and they send it all back to you. It's good. Sherry Blazer, yeah. What?
Just want to note that you can do that right here in this library. There's an 8mm film version.
Yes, I saw that, and I'm not sure.
There's the guy that right. There's the guy right there, huh? So that's part of your responsibility here is to do that with yeah. Oh, great! I saw that.
I've got several boxes. And yeah, it would take forever, I think, but.
So if I was to, if I was to bring these letters in, you could digitize. I could digitize them here.
It would take a very long time.
I know. I bet. Okay. Okay. All right. What now is that a public service to Elgin residents, or is it a charge, or what is that?
No, anybody can come in.
Okay. Okay. I'll have to.
We had ours originally done by card and camera. They used to be on the west side.
And
it cost almost $400
to digitize the letters.
Yeah.
Movies.
Movies.
Yeah, the movies.
Yeah.
Movies.
And it's just that it's a little pricey considering the amount of film I have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a lot.
That was $400 in 1960.
Yeah.
Well, if you look into this online called Scan Cafe, all one word, I've had good luck with them. Good luck. Other thoughts? Yeah, Bob.
I was going to say that, like Sharon, our family had photographs, and my father was in the CCCs, the Civil Conservation Corps, and he was educated, so they had him teach a photography class, and he put together these large albums of our family history, and that has been passed along to a nephew. But it's very interesting to go through. We've gone through several times. It shows all the relatives, and he was also had the writing like the older people would have. That it was very fine, and you could identify individuals very well. So it was a good way for us to track our past.
Great, thanks. So there are ways to do it. Other thoughts that people want to share about their collections or their letters. Mary?
City Hall, there was another building going north.
On Spring Street? Well, the grocery store or the camera place? The grocery store. The Paragon, yeah, the Paragon Food Market, yeah.
They used to have days when they would throw stuff, all the kids were getting out of school and they'd throw us all kinds of food and toys and let's school though before we got out.
Okay, to go down there and get it. Okay. Do you still have some of that stuff? No. Okay, so let's take a look. As you've just related in some of your discussion, what's contained in family letters? It's the thoughts of the writers. When I was working on the book, and I would take these letters, and I would just put them in front of me and type the words that were in the letter into my word processor. I thought, these are my dad's words. These are my mom's words. It was really sort of a magical thing for me to feel it coming through my fingers. So you get the thoughts of the writers. You might hear a family secret, revealing of some of the characters, locations. This one, looking at the postmarks. Postmarks, the dates are always intriguing. The styles of handwriting, somebody mentioned that, styles of handwriting. Different typesets, whatever your typewriter was or whatever you were using. All those things are contained in these family letters. We don't have this anymore. We don't have, now that we're all doing everything on word processing. See what you missed? No. Some reasons to organize the letters. This preserves family history for future generations, like some of you have talked about. It reveals unknown family relationships and connections. Some you'd like to know about, some you're surprised at, some, I didn't know that. Yeah, some of those kind of things. Provides insights into cultural and historical context, and creates a sense of continuity with our ancestors. And it given me a better even when I mentioned that letter about my mom on her honeymoon. Who would have thought that? Yeah, I didn't know her as a honeymooner. I knew her as a 35-year-old mom when I was born, so I didn't know her in that sense. And it sparks interest in genealogy and family heritage, so for people to do further research. And then some ideas, I think I've touched upon that. This is what I did. When I had all these letters in shoeboxes and file folders, I decided to keep the envelopes with the letters. I opened up the letters so that they were easier to read. Otherwise, they were just stuck in the envelope. And and other people have other systems. I put the letters in a plastic sleeve like that were shown around to you. And I put a tab on the side then with the date of the letter and the postmark date. So that would help to keep it organized for me. Again, we had 700 pages of these things. So then I put them in order by date. And for me, some people put them back in a box in order. I chose to place them in notebooks because that's how I did. I did that. And that's just a sample of what one of the notebooks looks like. There. And suggestion, read the letters, keep notes. You can just do other things you want to do to try to make some sense out of it for yourself or for your family. And then it becomes a conversation, like with your grandson probably, it becomes conversation pieces. It gets the discussion going, and the content maybe ties together with what you already know about your family. But it's been a nice adventure for me. Anything else about letters and your own histories and learning about Elgin this way, or any other comment? Yeah, Kay. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And it was very distinctive. And you had to put your hand down and you couldn't move your
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful way to write.
Oh, yeah, and it's still I've seen your handwriting recently. It's still there. It's still there. Yeah, Mary.
That is another material that again helped me do a family tree for all our, we're 250 in the Elgin area, 250 in Colorado, and 300 in California. So I've got all these family trees.
Mm-hmm. That helps you organize, keep them organized. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Trish. No. Good thing they wrote letters. Where would I get my material? No, they didn't write. Although I take that back. My mom, she didn't keep a diary, but she had, and Carrie has some of them. I have some of them. To keep track of her days, she just would get one of those things where you could put it in your pocket or your purse, and it just had the whole year in there, and it had a little square for each day. And then she would write what she did that day. And so we still have those. And so, played golf or had dinner with such and such, or did that, or saw Mrs. Camacho down the street or something like that. Yeah, Mary, let's see. Yeah, just like that. Yeah, so and she would just write things in them, and we kept those. So I think I have some, and every once in a while I think, well, maybe there's another book in there to take that apart. But yeah, so it wasn't really a journal or a diary in that sense, but it's a way she kept track of what she was doing and things like that, and we still have those. Yes, sir. Yes,
40 years of calendars and Christmas letters.
that you've kept.
50.
Oh,
I read an annual Christmas letter.
uh-huh.
That, even if we don't distribute as many as we used to, it's, if you made it to the Christmas letter, it's noteworthy of, who was doing what.
In that particular, but you said you've kept all the calendars over those years too.
Well, several, but she said 58 years of Christmas.
Yeah, Nicole, that gives you a history there too. Keep those. Yeah. Thanks for that. Other thoughts, things like that. Yeah, sure.
Quick note about keeping letters. If you're gonna put it in plastic, get it archived. Otherwise, the plastic will deteriorate and ruin your letters after about the time.
What kind of plastic?
Archival plastic.
Can you check mine out to make sure that I have the right kind? As long as you're here, make sure I've got the right kind.
Probably not. It's gonna be fine, but if you're gonna keep them in there for like 10, 20, 30 years, you want to upgrade. But
Yeah.
it's ruin your precious stuff.
10, 20, 30, I'm not sure who's going to be looking at those letters. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yes, sir.
Would you say that there's some significance to analyzing letters and sources from this era, as opposed to, like, say, if you were trying to recreate this project, where all these sources were like purely digital from texts, phone calls, and things? What do you think would be some of the differences in putting it all together?
If I was to digitize all these things, or what?
No, like the letters themselves. Like, say if I was doing it when I, was retired in 60 years or so, and all my letters were on my phone, like in text to my family and stuff. What do you think is some of the significance of the handwritten kind of sources from your era as opposed to that analog?
All right. Well, one thing that comes to mind, Ian, right? Ian. One thing that comes to mind is that I do a lot of writing back and forth emails and stuff. Do I save those emails? They're in there someplace in my system, but could I even retrieve them? Sometimes I will print an email that I think has some significance, but for me, I'm not sure how it would be for you, and you probably have the skills, probably you do have the skills, that you can go back and find all that stuff. I don't know where to start. When I'm going back to look for old emails, I think, I thought I saved that from whenever email started, and I can't find it. So I think one thing that I've found with these things that are actual copies that are written on paper, for me, they have a little more longevity than something that's handwritten in an email or a text. I have had to, even with text though, I'll go back and say, somebody wrote me that. Where did it go? And it's just. But do I take the move to print that text and keep it? No, because I'm at the point in my life I'm trying to get rid of some of that paper stuff. So for me to print the text, does that answer your question, Ian, or what? Yeah. Okay. All right. I think that's one of the differences. But I think that's sort of the contrast between communication formerly and communication now. There's nothing better than this day and age to type something to somebody at 9:15 and you get an answer sometimes at 9:20. Whereas when letters are going back and forth, it would take a week or two to get those back and forth, and I think that's such a difference. But there's a beauty in writing letters and communicating that way that I think is lost now, a little bit lost.
I think that's a big part of it. Yes, the intention of writing a whole letter that maybe you want to write for a week or so, they might not get a response for who knows how long. Whereas like nowadays, you might have 20 texts back and forth a day between a family member, and I think it's so much easier to paint a picture with intentional, full letters.
Yes, and I think I catch myself if I'm writing an email or a text to somebody, and I write it, and I think, well, they haven't written back yet, and it's only been a half hour, or it's even been after a week. And even Google now, I noticed on my Google Mail, they let me know when I haven't got a response from somebody. I thought that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You haven't written back to them yet. Okay, so I mean that's a whole different thing. But I think when I used to write letters, and I wrote a lot in my time when I was younger, I didn't always mail them with the idea that I was going to get an answer back. It was great when you got one, but you really couldn't write it with the intention of thinking, I'm going to get an answer. And when you go through, they just had a program, a lot of World War II history this week, coming out with the opening of the new museum in New Orleans, and just all the letters that went back and forth in all the wars, and just how revealing those stories are and things. Other thoughts?
My dad wrote, found some stuff about him that we had no idea he was World War II vet. He never talked about it at all. And we just found out he was at the Battle of the Bulge.
Uh-huh.
And when one of my aunts died, he gave us all this stuff. And I was reading it. He was referring to me as I was a baby. And it was just fascinating. Right. But I think back in the day when I was writing to my girlfriend down in we were going back and forth 8, 9 pages, stuff that were done by the kids. We didn't think at that time that you would be in this age, this digital age now, where, oh, this is this, like she sent me this 2 months ago, I read it, and then you throw it out. I threw out all the love letters.
Mm.
Which, I mean, I don't know what in God's name I was like, but we were moving, and I went, I can't.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Before I close up, I usually take a selfie of myself with the crowd in the background. So if you could just all get there, wave, make a funny face, whatever you want to do. Thank you. All right. The book itself is available here at the library. Also, I have copies here for sale if you'd like, and I can sign those copies for you if you'd like. If you're thinking about getting a copy and you don't have it yet, you can go to Sherry, the Public Museum over at Lord's Park and get it. You can go to the museum at Old Main. They have copies there. But if you wanted a copy that signed by the author, I can make that happen for you tonight. Or else, and I think Sadia, you said the copies are checked out right now. So you'd have to put yourself on a list to get the copy from the library here. But I appreciate Elgin Public Library doing that. So that's, and also at the back table, help yourself to bookmarks and these postcards. I've got them up here. You can get them from the front table too. And on these, speaking of the digital age, each one of these things have barcodes on there. It'll take you to my website, my newsletter, other things that I have going on with the book. There's clipboards back there. If you're not if you wanted to put your name on there, that's a very big option. If you want to put your name and your address on that clipboard back there, I'll get you a copy of my newsletters that I send out on about a weekly basis. I'll have a little article about what we did tonight here at the Dale Borden Public Library. So, anything else? Yes, thank you for that. Thank you. What I've learned in the self-published, I'm going to look at my notes to make sure I did everything. Yeah. I self-published this book, and self-published. There's 4 million here. Let's take my shirt out. It's falling out anyway. There were 4 million books published in the United States last year, and it's been that way for the last 3 or 4 years. 4 million books. 2 million of the 4 million are self-published because there's so many books out there, and people don't want to write. But not everybody can get in with a publisher. This one included. So half of the people that write their books go through a self-publishing route, and I've been very happy with that and how that worked out. And I worked with people that helped me get the cover design, get the inside all laid out, the interior design, helped with setting it up so that I could get it printed through. I printed through Amazon, and so how the sales go through there. And second book. So somebody asked about the second book. So part of what they say in book marketing is the one way to market your first book is you got to write another one, so I'm working on. I was working on it yesterday when I flew up. There's more stories, more letters that I said there were 700 pages of letters. I only probably used about maybe 100 of them in the book. So there's other letters that I could use and just build on that. And And the other thing I'm looking at is I've been making presentations to the funeral. They call it the death care industry now. Sometimes the death care industry includes not only morticians, funeral directors, undertakers, but also people that work in the grieving atmosphere, or death doulas. There's a big industry there. So one of the things that's come up in some of the discussions I've had with other funeral director associations is, what do people in the funeral industry, those people that shoulder the grief of everybody else, what do they do? What do they do? They take all that on, and they keep it to themselves because they respect the family with whom they're working. And it's not something that they're going to talk about or even find places to go to. There's now a lot more counselors that are there working with that, but some in this profession, what do you do? So part of the context of the second book is this: my family, they took vacations and they got out of town and they wanted to be away from the funeral home, away from the building, away from the telephone. So they would take vacations. So a lot of the letters I have to do with vacations. So I'm picturing it more, a little combination of mental health of what do you do in a profession when you need to help yourself, but also maybe a little bit of travel log too with the content of the letter. So that's, whoever asked that question, that's what I'm doing. Thanks, Mary. That's what I'm doing. So, other thoughts? Are we closing the library here, Sadia? She's got that I want to go home look on her face. So, okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Remember, if you want to, we're going to go to Danny's. If you want to join us, come up the street. We'll continue talking. If you were interested in getting